Please welcome Jeff Baer, Board of Directors for the U.S. Green Building Council.
Thank you, and good morning. As the loud voice from above just said, my name is Jeff Baer. I'm a Managing Director at Deutsche Bank and a member of the USGBC Board of Directors. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing two of the USGBC's brightest stars and biggest intellects. Both are distinguished executives who will present a very special session entitled Humans, Technology, and Aristotle. I think you'll find it very penetrating with their insights and enjoyable. Mahesh Ramanujam is the Chief Operating Officer at USGBC and President of GBCI. Mahesh has a notable talent for people-centric management, making decisions for the future with rapid growth in mind while taking responsibility for the current state. I think that's a fancy way of saying that he's a strategic thinker and he delivers in the present. Some would say that Mahesh's approach reflects the most fundamental values of USGBC. That's promoting sustainable development for lasting prosperity. As the USGBC and GBCI expand to include new rating systems such as sites, peer, well, and GRESB, and alongside LEED, Mahesh is maintaining his sharp focus on performance and measuring real impact in real time. His vision for a future of integrated knowledge and leading to action is becoming more and more evident every day. Scot Horst is USGBC's Chief Product Officer. Scott's responsible for all product research, development, implementation, and execution. That's a formidable portfolio. As the principal inventor of the LEED Dynamic Plaque, Scot is blazing a trail toward greater transparency and ongoing accountability in building performance. The market's moving away from one-time static certification approaches towards a more real-time, ongoing performance management model. Driven by metrics and captured by products like the Dynamic Plaque, Scot is working to introduce this change in the industry. With the addition of products in the GBCI portfolio, Scot is well primed to expand his impact and this new model, driving the overall green building industry toward a state of higher, ongoing, and demonstrated performance with more meaningful long-term change. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mahesh and Scot to the stage. Thank you.
All right, thank you for joining us today morning, and definitely it's not 8 o'clock, so we hope more people will come in as other sessions close out. It's my privilege to be in this room of wonderful leaders. We are very excited. We're very excited about Greenbuild. We're excited about your work. We're excited about the green building movement. And most importantly, we're excited about our partnership. So like any year, Greenbuild is always exciting out for us from inside USGBC point of view. We're always thinking about what's the next big idea we need to launch here. What's the new program? What's the new vision? What's the new idea? What's the new technology? And the list goes on. And the team feverishly prepares the whole year about what's the next idea that we need to present. But this year, we're going to take a little different approach, at least for this session, which is that we're going to not just talk about the vision, but actually carry you forward into a little bit of implementation, action, and results. So hope we'll be able to demonstrate that suitably today. Performance is the future. This is something that is becoming very clear every day when we talk and interact with you in the marketplace, that performance is the future. And what I am excited is what LEED did to design, construction, and operations of a building for the last 14 to 15 years. LEED Dynamic Plaque is going to do it for the next 10 years, or at least 20 years, or 100 years for performance. That is very exciting. I've been associated with LEED only for 6 years. I am still learning. I'm still fascinated by the concept. But the most important thing to me is wherever I go, wherever I travel, I notice two things. People love LEED. People love LEED. Second, they're always They're always there. The LEED buildings are there. Wherever we look around, there is a LEED building. Either it's upcoming or it's there. That makes us very happy, very happy. Whatever I learned about LEED, whatever I understood as a LEED concept, I learned it from the master, Scott Horst, my friend, Scott Horst. So I'll be always your eternal student. So with that, one comment that we heard in the last year's Master Series session was very relevant for us. It stayed with me and Scott throughout the year. Get to the point. So let's go, Scott.
Well, thank you, Mahesh. It's my honor to be here with you. As you all know, Mahesh, well, first of all, if you weren't at the plenary, you may not have heard Rick's announcement that he's leaving in 2017, and also the announcement that Mahesh Ramanujam will be the incoming CEO of USGBC and GBCI, which is very exciting.
Thank you. Thank you, Scott.
Mahesh and I started at USGBC about the same time. Mahesh was leading technology, and I came in to oversee the LEED program. And we've developed a partnership over the years that I believe has been very strong for both of us, that has given us a lot, because he always stretches me, and hopefully I stretch him. He helps me think beyond. Now, the goal of what we're trying to accomplish with all our tools and with everything that we do is based on a belief that more people doing more good things leads to more transformation. So we're always walking this line somewhere between, doing everything perfectly, like some of the other, like let's say Living Building Challenge, where you say, we're gonna go all the way. We don't say that. We say, we want 100,000 people doing a bunch of good things, leading toward that ultimate goal of everything shifting. So we want to just keep getting deeper and deeper into the economy, deeper and deeper into green buildings in order to shift, make a big shift. And Mahesh is always thinking about the economy. He's always talking numbers, numbers, numbers. I'm always thinking about how do you change people's thinking? How do you change how they come into the system that we have? So there are two ideas relative to our system that I just want to say as a setup for what we're going to talk about today. One is something we learned in the late 90s from Amory Lovins, the great thinker and master, who said that if you tend to optimize a system in isolation, you will pessimize the entire system. So if you go after making one thing really strong, let's say in a building system, you get a super efficient boiler, but you don't look at the size of the boiler relative to all the other systems, you're just wasting everything, and it'll make everything work less well. So we want to have our tools optimized to work with each other. So we're using all these new tools so they come along with each other and move markets and transform behaviors in a completely different way than they would all by themselves. So we leverage them. You could say we're leveraging them, but we're optimizing them together instead of in isolation. That's what we want to show today. The second idea is this idea of something we learned from another master, Bill McDonough, which is when you start, always go to nature first. And when we look at nature, what we see is nested subsystems. Everything in nature comes from another genus or another species and then a genus that always leads to something bigger and can scale. So if we think about nature the right way, we're always looking at starting in the middle of one of these little boxes and scaling out, whether it's a seed or a building or a program, or how we think about data and how it connects among the different ideas. So Mahesh, we've been doing LEED for many years. How do you think about LEED? Do you think of it as a rating system, a transformation tool, or a mindset?
When I walked into the USGBC building, I thought LEED was a product. Very quickly changed it to a tool. Then it suddenly became a market creation mechanism, and then it became a transformative mindset. And I think the answer is it's all of the above. What's interesting to me is that it actually adapts and evolves per your need. That's what is fascinating about LEED. So the favorite one for me is the mindset, because the LEED thinking is what I am fascinated by. And I believe that that is what is going to allow us to continue to scale into the future. So, since we talked about LEED, I cannot avoid doing our little bit of headlines about LEED. So, let's go to the most important numbers. So, LEED is everywhere. As I said before, LEED is everywhere. LEED is loved by all. The numbers speak for themselves. 72,000 projects, you know the numbers, 13.8 billion square feet, et cetera, et cetera. But the most interesting number from the GBCI box is the 1.85 million square feet of space that we certify every day. This number has been a consistent metric that we have tracked for the last 5 years. That talks about some level of consistency, quality, rigor, and confidence we give to the market. So I'm very excited by that. But then LEED is global, regional, local. What do we mean by that? Scot says it the best. Our ideas are global, but ideas get implemented at a local level. That's beautiful. I love that. The next one is the fascinating Booz Allen study. If Taryn and Marissa, are you guys in the room? Could you stand up for me, please? Please track them. They gave the game-changing study this year, which is the Booz Allen. The game-changing study is about connecting LEED certification to the GDP of United States. Let me underscore, this is only a United States report. 303.5 billion. 40% contribution of green construction to the US GDP in 2015. So imagine when we take this logic and deploy this in a global platform of global, regional, local, that number is going to be a game-changing number. So for the next 5 years, the target for this audience, the target for us, is to actually move the number up to 60%, at least for the United States. And we will come back and announce a new number for the rest of the world very soon, once we complete the study.
Yeah, but Mahesh, I'm sorry, I don't really care that, it's not that I don't care about these numbers. It's just that, like, we say these numbers every year at Greenbuild. It's like, you know, we're breaking our arm, patting ourselves on the back. I knew.
It's okay, it's okay.
But do we know what's really happening? I mean, do we really know what's going on? Are we just creating a lot of activity? Are we just getting people doing a lot of stuff because of all our credits? Or is it really transforming things? Is it transforming behavior, and is it transforming the market itself in a way that completely shifts everything? So let me talk just for a moment about what I mean by performance. So when we talk about performance, and it's very easy to get confused about this, it's sort of a concept that you need to think about. The box on the left is how we write LEED credits. So it's basically laying out all the steps that you need to do to meet a set of requirements in order to achieve something. The box on the right is the performance path. Now, they actually work very well together. So I'm not saying one is better than the other. The one on the left is really good. Let's say you have 200 people from a foreign country at a hotel that's about a mile away from where they need to be at 9 o'clock. You actually want to give them very good instructions on how to get there. LEED has been incredibly good at getting groups of people, project teams, all on the same page trying to meet a specific requirement. And they're guided by GBCI that says, nope, sorry, you turned left when you were supposed to turn right. And that keeps them disciplined and makes things happen. But it also kills innovation. So what we see on the right is a very innovative way of saying, we don't care how you do it. You can actually not leave the building and be there at 9 o'clock. You could do somersaults to get there. You could fly a helicopter to get there. You come up with any way that you possibly want to get there, and that's all that matters. So what we want is those things in conjunction. We want them happening together, not separate. We want to take the advantage of having both of these approaches. I believe that these numbers are wonderful, but my job at USGBC is to keep us from getting too comfortable. See, it's very easy to say, like, even because we're increasing the thresholds in the LEED system, that we're doing more. But what we aren't always watching is, how are we getting deeper? How are we going further? Where are we connecting with people? So the first day I walked into USGBC, there was a firestorm. Rick brought me in his office, Rick Fedrizzi, our great leader, brought me in his office, and he said, looks like there's going to be a front page article in the New York Times saying that LEED buildings don't perform. That put me on a mission that still exists to this day. Unfortunately, it's been way too long. We still cannot answer if LEED buildings really perform. To me, that's shameful. I mean, we do studies. We do studies that show that things are happening. We know that things happen well when you do a LEED building, but we can't say for sure with the data how well they perform and how they perform differently from other buildings. That's our goal. That's our job. So where we've been is a place of tension because people have been afraid that these things are working against each other, that somehow performance means that all the other things that are in LEED get taken for granted or we drop them. But that's not the case. What we're doing now is making sure that these things work together, that the LEED Dynamic Plaque carries on what LEED gives you from the very beginning. They work together. So, what do you think of that, Mahesh?
So Scott, I have a couple of responses for that. So let me start by telling a story. So Scott is very lavish with gifts. So for the first Christmas, he gave me a coffee grinder. The second Christmas, he gave me a cappuccino machine, an Italian cappuccino machine, if you know what I mean. I get up early in the morning, I go to my grinder, done, pour, done. And I go to my cappuccino machine, I ignore. I go straight to my coffee dripping machine. It's too complicated. So I called one day Scott. Saturday morning, me and Scott are talking. This is our usual routine. And I said, Scott, you know what, damn it? This grinder is the LEED Dynamic Plaque. And of course, the cappuccino machine is LEED. I need both. So I like the wake-up routine. Now, there is this one constant comment everybody has made to me. LEED, and you are the one who started it. Whenever I used to say, Scott, LEED provides simplicity, he said, no, Mahesh, it's not simple, it's complex. The complexity, the fight, the people do this hustling, bustling inside a project is what makes LEED project special. And then you stand up here and now give this fancy toy to us. Is it really that easy?
Well, let me start by talking about the design principles that we put together for the LEED Dynamic Plaque. And to me, this is very exciting because it was actually Rick that was constantly telling us, make it simple, make it simple, make it simple, because he instinctively knows, especially as a marketing person, that there are people that can't get past the barrier of the complexity of our system. So these are what we started with. We started by saying, lead with simplicity. That's awesome. Just that statement in itself has guided us so many times to come back and say, no, we need to keep this at a place where it's completely understandable. Design for bursts of innovation. What that means is don't make people think that they're going to be doing their building all day long, all night long, all the time. Now keep in mind our goal.
You're back.
Am I back? All right. Keep in mind our goal is a much broader audience, more people doing more good things, leading to more transformation. What that means is we can't ask them to translate a whole bunch of technical information. Who in the room, for example, can tell me what EUI is? Okay, maybe about half of you, but we're a Greenbuild. Who would be able to stand up and explain what a kilowatt hour is? But we're a Greenbuild. And who would feel very comfortable explaining what a BTU is, technically, and then making sure that 5,000 people or 10,000 people in the opening plenary would understand what it means. So we realized just the complexity of all the information that we need to get across is keeping us from being able to communicate really complex information. So what we did was we created a score. And what we're going to talk a little bit about is what that score means. So we're just trying to then help people understand whether the score is going up or going down. We aren't necessarily trying to help them understand everything that's happening relative to all the details of the building. What happens when you have a score and you can communicate that information? It means that you can talk to the tenant who doesn't know anything about the building or about energy or about water. You can talk to the building manager. You can talk to the person walking by the building. You can talk to the person that has nothing to do with the building. And they all understand one thing, up or down, 0 to 100. Does it compare relative to another project? And if we set up a really fair comparison, how can you compete to show that you're better? Because we know that's the key thing we've done with LEED. We've made people compete about being better. It's the most awesome thing. It's one of the things I love the most about LEED.
Scott, you've said this many, many times now. The concept of compare and compete is very intriguing to me. So what is the shift? Are you shifting your product development strategy? Now you're going to go and do all these simplification. What happens to LEED?
So a lot of people have been worried. We've been in this situation where, as I was talking about before, people are worried that LEED might go away. Of course, it can't, because it does things that the LEED Dynamic Plaque doesn't do. But the LEED Dynamic Plaque does things that LEED doesn't do as well, right? So a lot of people in our community have thought that the LEED Dynamic Plaque is sort of LEED light, or some too easy version of LEED. So now I have to say that everyone that has thought so far that it's too easy or not rigorous enough hasn't used it. The people that have used it have all thought, wow, this is really interesting. It's very challenging. I know Gretchen Sweeney moderated a panel. Gretchen, you can stand up. She moderated a Connect and Learn. Yes. Of people that are using the LEED Dynamic Plaque that were all highly skeptical until they started using it, and now find that they're going to take it to replace their own internal tools because of the simplicity that allows them to understand things that they couldn't understand before.
So what is the key difference for you here between tools and people? How are you connecting tools and people?
So this may just be me, and it may just be LEED, because I work a lot with LEED staff and LEED committees, but typically we think the world starts with LEED. You know, it's like, because we love those numbers so much, we think the world starts with LEED, and then the building comes next, and then the people. And because we've had so many people wanting to change things all the time, we have to put people last. Now what we're doing is switching that. We're saying people are first. If we're going to get more people doing more good things to create more transformation, people have to be first. So everything that you're going to see today is about putting people first and the tool last and focusing people on the building.
So let's get back to numbers.
Okay.
11 billion square feet of LEED certified space and registered and certified space. We have 1.4 billion buildings in GB. We have 61,000 assets in GRESB. Where are you with LEED Dynamic Plaque?
Are you trying to shame me? No, so it was a slow start, I have to admit, because there are a number of things that happen when you create something new. Again, it's the challenge of, is the new thing robbing from the old thing, instead of, is it working with it? And so we've had a lot of concern about that. But essentially what's happened in the last 6 months is there's been a big shift. People that have been using it are feeling better, they're buying it more. So now we have, I think as of today, we have almost 400 projects. It was 340 projects at the beginning of Greenbuild. We'll have 500 projects by the end of the year. We have 83 million square feet in the system. So there's enough there to give us some real meat and some guts. And the coolest thing is we have 3 portfolios in the system with a number of strategic trials. Large portfolios that are testing it out and then waiting to see if they really like it. So the first one is put in 100 buildings, not all of them LEED, and I'll come back and talk about that later. And we think we'll have 10 portfolios by the end of first quarter next year. So it's looking up.
Thank you. Scott, I would like to jump in and talk a little bit about technology here, if I may, so, given my background. One of the challenges while designing and architecting these platforms is which methodology you follow, right? I mean, when we talk about LEED being unique, this is where I think really it becomes unique. Be it marketing, be it technology, be it customer experience, these shared services have to transform also. So the philosophy, there are 2 schools of philosophy, Apple and Facebook. Since it's familiar to all of you, it's easier for me to talk through that. When you look at the Apple, they keep everything as a secret. It's kept in a black box. Probably there is a rumor that 7 years of product design has been done. And then they one day launch it because they know exactly what the market wants and they're transforming the market. They go and deploy it. But then when you look at Facebook, if you're a Facebook user, you will notice that nothing changes. It's pretty static. it's pretty static from a functionality point of view. At least that's what you perceive. But then as you go into the system, you realize quietly 1 or 2 features are being slowly added. So as technology team leaders, we had a lot of challenges on what methodology to adapt. And it became very evident for us, the initial approach that we took for LEED Dynamic Plaque was perceived to be an Apple approach. You took a black box approach because you have done 15 years of business in the second model, collaborating. So the difference is, are you going to build it for the community or going to build it with the community? And I think LEED is about building with the community. So what's your perspective on how LEED Dynamic Plaque is going to respond? You can answer that later when you get to the flow. But that's a question I want to put it there. But the most important part from our point of view is that the Facebook methodology has been very productive for us because, one, if you come to LEED Online every day, you see incremental changes coming in. Every day, we drop some set of changes. The same way with LEED Dynamic Plaque, I would say that we're also dropping incremental changes every day. What that means is that this trial option that Scott talked about a little earlier, we dropped it in less than 2 weeks. So it gives me 2 things, agility and scalability. Agility is to keep moving fast, to your point about put people first and tools next. Second is about actually coming and scaling the environment because we have millions of projects to handle. And that's what LEED Online does, and that's what we'll do with LEED Dynamic Plaque. So it's pretty exciting. So now I have a question for you. We will scale the platform. You don't need to worry about that. We got it. What about scores?
Yeah, so let me talk about scores for a minute. But first, Mahesh, I just want to say one thing. How many of you have used LEED Online for years that are in the room? And how many of you used to complain about it all the time? Okay, I'm not going to ask how many of you complain about it now. But what we know is
Thank you, Scott.
that it's completely changed. And it's changed mostly because what happened was there was a company that came in and said, sat with Mahesh in the room and said, you don't want to be a software company, but this is a software guy, and he's actually created a software company out of USGBC since 2009. So what's happened is that LEED Online, we don't hear the kind of complaints we used to hear. Doesn't mean that it's always working the way it can work, but we have an amazing technology team that is doing fantastic work.
Thank you, Scott.
So scoring. Scoring is not new to us. The LEED scorecard is like a magic document. Anyone that's used a LEED scorecard with a group of people in a LEED meeting, they know what it's capable of doing. And it's this simple thing. It's almost like a Cub Scout checklist. You know, it's just got a bunch of ideas, and the depth is behind the ideas, and everyone sits in the room and says, yep, we can do that. Yep, we can do that. Nope, that's going to cost too much. Maybe we can do this other one. But when they start to see the connections, let's say of the outdoor water to the indoor water, or to the potential heat island effect on the roof, or biodiversity, to what happens when you flush the toilets, they realize, oh, if I do certain things, all these things line up, and I get a whole bunch more points. So LEED is constantly incentivizing people to do better in this really fantastic way. But now we're coming into this idea of a performance score. And I showed this last year, but I want to spend a little time showing how the performance score works, because as I said before, the challenge of a score, of making things simple, is that we have this highly intelligent community that's very technical, that can answer what a BTU is and a KBTU, but you feel like there's this black box syndrome. You feel like there's something in there that you don't understand. So let me walk through how we do the scores. So if I can get the next slide. So I'm going to show you the energy section here. Now, each section in the LEED Dynamic Plaque has its own dashboard, or comes with a dashboard that shows you a racetrack like this. The outside of the racetrack is my score this month in energy. The next track in is my score last month, and the one inside is my score same period last year. Now, what that's allowing me to do is benchmark against myself. We know that people always improve when they benchmark against themselves. We can also benchmark them against our database of LEED buildings, so that's the global average, and we benchmark them against the local average, which right now is your state or your country. So let's go to the next slide. What we do is in energy, and I'm showing you this methodology because this is a scalable scoring methodology that we're using for all the different categories. We go to 3 dimensions and see the buildings and how they relate to each other. The dimensions are square footage, occupancy, and daily CO2 emissions. And we calculate emissions the same way that EPA does in Energy Star. Now let's go into that lower corner. This goes up to 3 million square feet, but this is 100,000 square feet. What I want you to notice is something. See those buildings up on the top that all look like each other? Those are all big box retail stores. So they're essentially the same square footage and the same occupancy, but you can see they have significantly different emissions. So the interesting thing about this, though, that I want you to see is the software clusters buildings. The software picks buildings that are acting like each other and pulls them together. We call those reference sets. We call clusters. They're clusters of buildings that we call reference sets. So then we take this information, and let me have the next slide, please. We put it back to 2 dimensions. So see, now we're just looking at occupancy and square footage. See, you can see the grapes there. Those are the big box retail stores. Up in the upper right, we have gigantic, humongous office buildings, big towers. And down in the lower left, we have teeny little office buildings. And over there, in the Pleiades, number 7, those are stadia. Up in the top, one of the blue outliers is a grocery store. But we take this information, those are each reference sets, we call them. Now let me go to the next slide. And we give a lot of really complicated information to a group of experts. What you see here, this is just one of these clusters. And what we're looking for is for the experts to tell us what's best and what's worst. That's all they have to do. But they have to have a complicated discussion about what does occupancy mean in an office building versus what does occupancy mean in a coffee shop versus what does occupancy mean in a big box retail store. It means very different things. Now, typically, we're just getting energy use intensity, right? But what does energy use intensity tell us? How empty a building is. It tells us basically how much energy is being used per square foot. So the emptiest building will always have the lowest energy use intensity. So what we want to do is very carefully craft a notion of performance about optimizing space to its best use. So just look over there at the far right, you'll see one building has 690 square feet per occupant, and the other building has 300 square feet per occupant. So vast difference, right? And then we give emissions per square foot and emissions per occupant. Now let me go to the next slide. We take the best and the worst. So the best building is up on the top, chosen by experts in each of the reference sets, and worst is at the bottom. And then buildings in between fall on that plateau in any one of the different points. So it's not a linear regression. What's interesting about this is the plateau is called a monotonic interpolating spline. So it's flattening the data, and it's monotonically saying yes this way or no this way. It's a very simple yes or no from a mathematical perspective. I'm not the mathematician. He was awesome, the guy that built this for us. But it puts all that there, and then we get a score from that. The cool thing about that, Mahesh, is it's scalable.
Great. So Scott, a couple of things. Number one is I want to sum it up a little bit. So there's a score, there's a reference set, and there is an algorithm that actually allows you to compare and compete. That's pretty cool. The second part is, you made your point. It's not easy, we agree. Monotonic interpolating spline. My goodness.
But it's to show that the complicated part is behind, it's the black box. I mean, the unfortunate part is that you don't get to see that when you're, all the time. But it is a group of experts that determines how it works.
Great. So you talked about your first day at USGBC. Let me talk about my first day at USGBC. Pretty much we joined at the same time. Since that day, I've repeatedly heard this conversation about we have issues applying LEED to existing buildings. LEED does not work in hospitality sectors. LEED has prerequisites that everybody cannot achieve. For example, a casino, for example, a residential space, shared spaces, and the list goes on. So when you sit and look at from the perspective of market transformation, is market transformation only for leaders? What about the bottom of the pyramid?
Yeah, right. I mean, the reality is, I'm not putting any of the numbers down, but you know who our market is? Our market is Class A office buildings in primary markets everywhere in the world. We're really good at it. We define what Class A office means everywhere in the world. What about everybody else? How do we get to them?
So what's the solution from your point of view? Does LEED Dynamic Plaque, you mentioned earlier that it applies to non-LEED projects also. How? What does it mean?
So you can imagine that if we're agreeing that this works with LEED, then you don't have to necessarily buy a reference guide to put data in and get a performance score. So we can give a performance score for non-LEED buildings, and we can scale this whole system up to even do cities. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later.
Great, great. So since we have been talking for quite some time, let me show you something on the platform also. It's real. We're not just making this all up. So the first thing is that I'd like to do a quick introduction of how LEED Dynamic Plaque integrates with the LEED online platform, which is my favorite platform. I spent 6 years on it. So it's very easy. You'll see it. You put your keyword, and all the buildings from GBIG, any building that has been listed, and the most important thing that you have to see at the bottom is you can actually create your building, your own asset that does not exist in LEED Online or GBIG, and it'll get replicated with its due consideration. So if you move on, here you see there's a very interesting list. I would ask you to just pay one quick attention to a couple of things on the screen. One is it's a USGBC headquarters. Of course, it's a LEED Platinum commercial interior. You can see your LEED Online project ID. People who are familiar with LEED Online will appreciate that. And then you also see the LEED certification right there. So you access that. Of course, you see your score. You can scroll down to see your detailed scores. But then you actually go to this interesting new section called Inputs. Now here, what you see is that at the top, to an earlier point that Scott made about integration of strategies and data and scoring, everything is all coming together. We have been building these systems for now 6 years in silos, but with an integrated strategy.
So
that's the
Mahesh,
reason.
You come into LEED Online, or you see the LEED Dynamic Plaque, but you come into LEED Online through performance, or you see your performance score first, but then you could go to the scorecard that initially got the building its first certification.
Yeah, precisely. Not just the scorecard. Let's drill down even further. And you will see that your list of LEED credits in the LEED Online is visible. And then if you click one more, you're only one click away from your LEED Online form. That's pretty cool. That's the work we have done from simplification of LEED Online. So it's not only LEED Dynamic Plaque is simpler, but it is forcing other systems to get simpler because it won't fit.
So here, for the first time, we're actually seeing these systems together, working together, not somehow competing against each other. You can see actually that we're saying that performance is part of certification.
Absolutely, because the idea is design construction requires LEED, but then when you shift the focus to performance, at least in the traditional path, it needs to be integrated. And what we are trying to aspire to do is the concept of recertification that exists now needs to be even more real-time, even more real, and I think that's what you've made it happen with the LEED Dynamic Plaque. So let me move on to the next part of the demo, since you mentioned about the non-LEED project. Again, we'll do the same thing. It's a pretty consistent interface. So we search the keyword. Now we go to the next project, and as you can see, it doesn't have a LEED Online ID, and it's not LEED certified. Now, it's not only non-LEED projects. It could be a BREEAM project, it could be a DGNB project, it could be an Energy Star project, it could be a 3-star project in China, it could be a Griha project in India. The list goes on, as you said. Now, when you click on this, you see the score again, but what's different?
There's no LEED logo there.
Exactly. That's the only difference. And then when you go to the input section, this is where you're going to see something fascinating. At least we are excited about it. Same LEED scorecard, because the foundation is LEED, the principles of LEED being adopted by everybody. But the problem is LEED constrains certain projects sometimes based on prerequisite or whatever. So you again go to energy. Here you see a different practice. If Melissa Baker is in the room, you should get up. Please get up, Melissa Baker. Thank you so much for accomplishing this. What she has done is that she has taken the entire LEED form interface, LEED intents, documents, guidance, reference guides, and curated them as a simple survey-based tool. So if you click on that, if you go further, you can see at the bottom a simple yes-no answers are there. So many questions were asked to us about how do we do self-certification, how do we put our assets that are not LEED certified, how do we actually come back and record the activity that we do but which we don't want GBCI to do. And the list goes on. So this absolutely addresses all of those elements.
So you could, up on the top there, there's strategies, data, and analysis. You could put your data into the system and start tracking your performance, then do a credit or a strategy and see if it improves your performance.
Precisely.
And you could keep working towards certification if you're a non-LEED project by continuing to build strategies and seeing if it's improving your performance.
Correct. And the fundamental shift here is from recertification, we are going to ongoing certification. The data is the common denominator, and we're going to ongoing certification. Of course, strategies do matter, as you rightly said. Now, the interesting part here is that when we talk about strategies, look at the top, the add strategies. That allows you to add your own custom strategies to this interface of your requirements that you actually submit to GBCI. So the GBCI will be able to actually appreciate your unique perspectives, unique approaches that are being submitted. And that's the simplicity of this platform, and I'm very excited about this particular thing that Melissa and team have put together. I think this is going to be a game changer, particularly from broadening the bottom of the pyramid.
So let's say you're a company and you're tracking something that's not in LEED, like there's some issue that you watch that isn't in the LEED rating system. You can actually put that strategy in and we'll track it for you. So it becomes a usable tool that you're capable of using in all kinds of ways.
Absolutely, and the idea here is to simplify the engagement with LEED, but not to simplify LEED itself, because we want the team's energy to go on building performance and building improvements rather than dealing with GBCI or USGBC. That's a fundamental premise here. And then also allowing other non-LEED projects to be part of the system. Okay, now Scott, you talked about scores, so let's move on a little bit. Let's quickly kind of show visually where we are. So what's your perspective on this? You said scores and scores are connected. Do you want to talk a few minutes about that?
Well, I mean, it's really what I was just saying about being able to track your performance score while you're also tracking your LEED score. Because if you're capable of doing that, then you can actually continually find, as you do more LEED, which credits are actually getting you where you want to be the most. So, you know, the great thing about LEED is we say it's a holistic system. It's not just energy, it's not just water. It helps you see the whole of a green building. But of course, the menu approach to LEED means that you get to pick a lot of things. That means that a LEED Platinum building in one place isn't always necessarily the same as a LEED Platinum building in another place. But when you track the performance score, you can see how similar they're performing. That's a much better fair comparison, and that's going to become very powerful, because we can look at LEED Platinum buildings versus non-LEED buildings, or just LEED buildings versus non-LEED buildings, BREEAM buildings versus non-BREEAM buildings, buildings anywhere in the world that are using different systems, or just really well-managed buildings versus non-LEED buildings. And then bring them in and get them to try to do more, so to get to a certification level. People get value in their asset from LEED certification. We want to continue to provide that value, but we want to find different ways to bring them in the door.
That's nice. Now, let's shift a little bit of gears here, and let's talk about GBIG. You know, many of you are familiar with GBIG. It has been built as an independent platform.
Oh, can I just show one thing?
Yes.
Can we just go back to that slide? So there are two slides here really quickly. We built these, Gami, who's in back, him and his team have built these analytical tools which are giving you information from the LEED Dynamic Plaque. So it's essentially, these are sliders in each of the categories that allow you to say, if I want to improve my score by so many points, how much do I need to reduce my emissions? And then we don't tell you how to reduce your emissions. We go to the market, goes and finds good people. But then instead of that energy going into documentation, it's going into the building. It's going into actually performing, making the building perform better. And then because our score is based on carbon, what I want to show is we're capable of functioning like a clean development mechanism, because GBCI is monitoring and verifying the data that's coming in, something that no other system is doing in the world that I know of. They're managing that data. So we can give you a baseline number of carbon in Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions, and then that might be ASHRAE 2013, ASHRAE 90.1 2013. Then if you did an energy model, when you did your LEED new building, we'll give you an estimated carbon, Scope 1 and Scope 2. And then now, with a year of data in the LEED Dynamic Plaque, we'll give you Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions, which then give us actual Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions, which then give us beyond business as usual number for carbon that you can sell. Even the Scope 2 emissions, even in the United States, you can sell those to the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. But in other parts of the world, there are markets that would allow you to sell those. The numbers aren't high with a single building, but with a portfolio of buildings, they're significant.
Thank you, Scott. Let's jump on to GBIG. You know, a lot of people use GBIG, so I want to talk a little bit about how the integration could happen. The beauty about GBIG is we talk about buildings, we talk about scores, we talk about the deeper aspects of the asset, the building itself, but GBIG gives the context of connecting people, organizations, products, technologies, cities, countries, and of course, the planet. So I love GBIG, and the most interesting part for me is the simple integration that we have achieved. So you can go to LEED Dynamic Plaque, use the same interface. You actually see that if you see the 3 dotted lines where the arrow is pointing, that's where the GBIG is integrated. So if you click on that, you'll be able to just actually breeze through GBIG. So now GBIG and LEED Dynamic Plaque are integrated. So you'll not lose any functionality of GBIG, but we maintain the context of GBIG within LEED Dynamic Plaque. So I have to thank Chris. He has done a fantastic job of building a standalone platform, which we are able to easily integrate. The next one is GRESB. I would like to say, you know, we are very excited about GRESB. And when we did the planning meeting with the GRESB team earlier this week, all ideas they had, I told them it's all old. Let's go build a new idea, because the potential for GRESB is only growing every day, and it's going to be exponential. Now, the beauty about GRESB is the stats. The stats are pretty impressive. This year's 5th annual GRESB survey report is phenomenal. 51 institutional investors covering about $6.1 trillion of institutional capital. Yes, it is a trillion. And 707 participants, 61,000 assets, covering a total value of about $2.3 trillion. And that number is pretty impressive. So our idea is, how do we actually homogenize? How do we actually continue to integrate the asset level data with a portfolio level or an institutional level data monitoring? And the interface is going to be very simple. So let's go on. So here you see that the GRESB score is already there. So you have 2 scores. So you have an 86 for your building as an asset, but you're also able to see the GRESB score of 23. So if you click on that, it actually takes you to the GRESB scoring platform. So the full dashboard is accessible to you. So this is pretty straightforward from our point of view, because all these systems are suddenly coming together. So it's beautiful. Now, Scott, you know, I talked about GBIG and GRESB, and you touched on cities. Now, you and I have talked about cities. This is the next thing I've been asking you for a long time, besides the non-LEED projects, is that how do we provide a city solution? You know, we have discussed a lot about LEED community, LEED neighborhood development, LEED district, LEED city, and I believe that the definition itself is not clear. What's a city, what's a neighborhood, what's a community? So where is LEED going with this, and how does this platform, or does this platform has got any relevance at all for LEED, or sorry, cities?
So the challenge with cities or tracking groups of things is the boundaries, and how you set boundaries so you can make fair comparisons as you go. So let's go back to our data slide again. Actually, now I call this the data slide. So think of that small box as a commercial interiors project, the next one as a building, the next one as a campus, the next one as a neighborhood, the next one as a district, and the outside is a city. So what we've done in the middle ones, we have data coming from meters. Now, what we have with the outside, we're going to code a metadata from the outside in, and we've got Vatsal Bhatt, who's in the room. Vatsal's from Brookhaven Labs. Vatsal, if you'd stand up. Vatsal's been collecting data on cities for years. He's been pulling reports that are published all over the place, putting that data in a spreadsheet. So now we're capable of scoring 64 cities. So it's not 64 cities of combined buildings, it's actually 64 cities of metadata. So what we're showing, next slide please, what we're showing with these 64 cities is projects where we have per capita data. So that's the part that makes it scalable. So we're going, again, data emissions per person allows us to basically scale this up all the way into cities. And then the city has its score that it can watch whether it's improving or not. In this case, we aren't trying to create a city rating system. We aren't trying to create credits. We're simply helping cities know whether they're improving or not in these different categories. And we can talk more when we have more time about all of the specific metrics that we're tracking.
So Scott, you talked about cities and data entry. So what happens if a city is ready to give the data? Do they need to wait until some protocol and programs are published?
No, we're building the input screens to standardize data input from all the different cities. So we think that's going to be quite powerful because it means that people can manage their data in a single place. Every time right now a new employee comes in, they have to figure out what the last one did and figure out how they publish that information in the proper way. So we'll help them manage that data. Right now they can send us a spreadsheet and we'll get it in the system. Vatsal's bringing cities in from India and China already.
Good. So now, in the interest of time, let's keep moving a little bit. The next topic that I would like to kind of talk about is we talked about LEED, we talked about buildings, we talked about organizations, we talked about people, we talked about products and technologies. Most important thing, our children. So the Center for Green Schools' vision is, at USGBC, is to have every child in a green school within this generation. So when you look at it from that point of view, the work that the center's team had done this year is phenomenal. While you are working this platform, they have been busy working with 67 organizations in the country and around the world to define how to actually measure a performance of a child in a school. There are 2,600 elements of data that has to be tracked for you to be able to come back and actually measure a child's performance. That's scary. So duly, Rachel Gutter showed up to my office and said that, look, I will collect the data, but you figure out what you do with the damn data. It's pretty cool. So if you look at this, it falls into 3 broad categories. The net impact, which you're familiar with, energy, water, waste, and then you have the health and performance, the most important aspect that we are all actually trying to get our hands around, and then the environmental and sustainability literacy. This was the easy one to solve for me, thanks to Scott. How we solve it? Good. These 2 things goes into the dynamic plaque. It's done. You don't need to waste any more time because the combination of the strategy framework and the LEED Dynamic Plaque brings that particular simplification in terms of our strategy. So the only thing that's left is environmental and sustainability literacy. So the interface is consistent. Let's move on. So here we go. Go on search, and let's now pick up the DC public school that is not LEED certified. Again, same interface. You're able to see the full score of the school, but it's going to be dynamic. And most importantly, you see the environmental literacy score tracked right there. But the most interesting part there is, you also see that we subtly amended the scorecard. We are not modifying the LEED scorecard, don't worry. We have added a framework called an environmental literacy. And again, that follows the same framework of actually embedding the questions that Rachel is generating that will target environmental literacy in this. So it's a scalable framework. Yes, Scott, we agree. It's a scalable platform. So this is exciting. Now, the ability to integrate buildings, cities, GBIC, GRESB, and schools is what we have done already. But as Rick puts it the best, LEED V4 is the quantum leap of how we are going to benchmark sustainability in built environment. So LEED V4, particularly the challenges that you're faced with materials, I think you have to stand up a brand new platform to actually come back and get our arms around that particular premise of materials. What do you think about that?
Yes, of course, a whole new, no. No, we don't need a whole new platform, because if you think about it, think about how materials perform. We're looking at greenhouse gas emissions, we're looking at water, we're looking at waste, we're looking at embedded energy and transportation, we're looking at how the material affects you from a health perspective. So we're actually capable of building using the same scoring mechanism for materials, but we haven't built it yet. That's coming.
Okay, thank you. So since we are getting to the fair end of the session, I want to show 2 favorite slides of mine. First is the beautiful strategy that we deployed in the last 6 years, thanks to you, thanks to Rick. The strategy of LEED being global, regional, local. But what is more exciting to me is the next slide. LEED Dynamic Plaque is global, regional, local, today, now. That's exciting. So, Scott, first I want to thank the team. Last year we introduced the concept of DARPA. So I think the team led by Gretchen, Gami, Sarah Biente, we have Rajiv, we have Taran, and our team also sits outside. Al Skadaski, and Gary Thomas of CBRE, who have been relentless, coming to you, me, and Rick, and saying, get it better, get it right for the market. So I think we had to give a big shout out for them, because we are moving it, we're making this happen. Thanks to the team, and thanks to Gary and Al. So I'd like to give one more. Now, when I met Gary yesterday night, the first question he asked me was, is Scott going to sing?
No.
So Scott, this looks like my presentation. So I think I'm intrigued to know, what do you think about humans, technology, and why Aristotle?
Well, so Aristotle gets the short shrift here because we're pretty much out of time. Normally, I like to start a presentation talking philosophy because I believe, like Ludwig von Wittgenstein says, that the way you look at the world changes everything about it. That Weltanschauung, or the worldview you have, is what changes the world, and that how we think about what we do makes such a big difference. So I wanted to talk to you about a few philosophers, but I'm only going to mention one thing about Aristotle. Aristotle reflected something called the city-state in his book 1, Politics. And the city-state had 4 characteristics. First, the city-state exists by nature, so it's a natural phenomenon, which means that we use cities to connect with nature. Second, human beings are by nature political animals. Political mean the sense that we're capable of communicating with each other and coming to agreements about things that we disagree about. Third, the city-state is prior to the individuals. So the city-state is something that is more important than each of us. It's our collection and what we do that really matters ultimately, not what each of us does. That's a powerful thought for me, because I believe that if we think that way, that will change how we work together. And then the fourth one is that the city-state is by nature invented by humans, even though it's natural. So that means he's telling us, it's called political naturalism. He's telling us that there's something incredibly natural and beautiful about the way we work together. But ultimately, he says something that I believe is super powerful. We are not capable of realizing ourselves as humans without being citizens. Now, this is LEED projects that have occurred around the world over time. What if we think of ourselves not in the same boundaries as a city-state, like the city-state of Washington, D.C., but a city-state of people that do good work all around the world collectively together? I would thank Aristotle for that thought, and I thank you for being fellow citizens with me today as we become new citizens of a great world together. Thank you.
Are you going to sing a song?
No.
Thank you, everyone. It's wonderful.